If there's one thing I've become known as on YouTube is it's the water cooling guy. Well, the water cooling guy right now is kind of coming at you with a very sad state of affairs that I feel like I just need to get off my chest when it comes to everything that's happening in this particular industry, and it's not good. The Q60 thick CPU cooler from Height features a hinged 5-inch ultra slim IPS 720 by 1280 display, a 60 Hz refresh rate, and 300 nit brightness, offering unique customization for your build. The Q60 also features Height's revolutionary digital hardware interface, Nexus Link, for sequential lighting and cooling control, with both thermal and positioning sensor data using a single cable, and supports up to 34 devices and 2 channels with Nexus Link amp scale. With the 53mm thick 240 radiator with 32mm thick FP12 fans, keep your CPU nice and cool for those long gaming sessions. To see the full list of features, specs, and supported CPU sockets, follow the sponsored link in the description below. So I don't really know what all I'm gonna say in this video. I'm sort of just gonna like bleh with my words on this, but it is a sad state of affairs right now when it comes to the water cooling industry specifically. Now, obviously, we are dealing with some record high levels of inflation. We're talking about excess spending has pretty much stopped for most people. I mean, we're talking all commodities. We're talking like luxury coffees. We're talking about unnecessary spending on entertainment. You name it. So when it comes to the computer industry and the tech industry as a whole, I think the entire tech industry is in a deep recession right now, if not maybe a depression. But we're going to talk specifically about the water cooling industry and how this has sort of affected that, and my hopefully call to action to maybe help save it before it kind of implodes entirely upon itself. It should be no surprise that the EK water blocks scenario that we're currently experiencing is affecting everyone. EK water blocks was by far the largest and most expensive, we'll talk about that in a second, brand in all of water cooling. They made up well over 50% of the market when it came to their products that they sold, how widespread their products were sold around the world, and now unfortunately how widespread their implosion of their own culture has started a domino effect across the entire industry. Now it doesn't all just fall on EK though. There's other big players in the industry that are also dealing with severe slowdown / recession types of behavior, and that is aqua tuning. Aqua tuning / phobia, PHOBYA, which is also an aqua tuning brand, is also one of the largest players in the industry. A German company, and then obviously EK Water Blocks is out of Slovenia. So both of these are European countries that just had this stranglehold on the entire water cooling industry. And they're experiencing problems too right now. And both of these companies are dealing with issues on being able to not only produce product, but get that product into the hands of e-tailers. And then once they're in the hands of e-tailers, it's about whether or not the consumers have the excess money to even be able to spend on something like this, which is clearly not putting food on their table. So as you can imagine right now, as spending is at an all-time low for most people, on the heels of the most all-time high we had kind of ever seen post-human malware, I think a lot of these brands did not do a good job at necessarily adjusting to the amount of slowdown there was going to be. So obviously you have your baseline cost to operate, which means your income has to be above that line. If your income starts to come nearer to that line, you have to reduce your operational costs. You have to have a buffer there. If that operational cost stays pretty stagnant and your income suddenly goes skyrocket, which is what a lot of companies experienced with the massive spending that people went crazy with once the world sort of returned to normal, a lot of times the operational costs grow with the income. You start hiring more, you may get bigger facilities, you might start spending more on unnecessary stuff. And then what happens is reality sets in and those income levels start to drop, but your operational costs stay up here. This is when you start hearing about massive layoffs with companies like Intel and whatnot. Or you start to hear about companies like EK Water Blocks, which are no longer able to pay their suppliers, or they're no longer able to pay their distributors, or they're not able to pay their employees. In fact, I've even heard recently that EK Water Blocks apparently has lost their shipping contracts with like worldwide shippers. So now you're stuck with inventory that you can't even get to your distributors if you're even paying them to distribute. Otherwise, they're going to hold on to your product as a ransom. And you can't get the products into the hands of the consumers. And then it goes public that you're kind of dick-holing everyone that you owe money to. Then you get the fallout of the consumer being very upset with your brand and they stop buying it. I mean, for instance, I myself, since all of this news has happened, has pretty much stopped using EK in any of our custom builds. And when somebody comes to me, like I have a friend about to do a build for, he's like, what product should I use? I shouldn't use EK, right? And my statement is always, that's between you and your own like ethics. If you want to use EK, that's on you. I'm not going to promote saying don't use EK because that's a personal decision. Same thing when it comes to like ACE use, right? It's that whole discussion. So unfortunately, when you get a company like EK, which as I said, is more than 50% of the industry when it comes to volume and market share, going through a sudden halt on anyone wanting to basically do business with them or the consumer wanting to consume EK Water Blocks products, that can obviously lead to a ripple effect that has extreme consequences for everyone all the way down to the small mom and pop type businesses that are operating in this industry. So what I'm referring to now is the fact that what we're seeing is a fallout effect where a lot of the e-tailers and stuff that exist are experiencing extreme conditions now when it comes to the amount of consumerism that's happening with the industry. So this is why the title of this video was something along the lines of, is this the end of the water cooling industry as we know it? And I think right now this is the end of the way we've known it. But the question is, what does the future hold when it comes to water cooling products? These are not necessities. Nothing on this table is a necessity. Nothing on that wall behind me with my D-frame or my E1 custom water cooled builds are any sort of a necessity. And I do want to point out both of those builds are full EK loops. So that shows you how far back that D1 or that D-frame goes and how the fallout of the whole EK thing, which apparently has a lot more information coming down the pipeline with that, and I'm not even going to get into that. You all know who to watch for that information. Is just having an absolute ripple effect through the entire industry. So you get all the way down to the warehouse worker that is just pulling these products and shipping labels and boxing them up for UPS to take to you. So everyone down to that level, from the CEO level at EK Water Blocks down to the guy doing picking and packing for these small businesses are being affected. Now this is not a call to action to say go buy EK Water Blocks. That's not what I'm saying at all. Because fortunately there are a lot of other brands out there that exist. And I think that's another part of the equation here that has really just sort of affected the industry as a whole, when I'm referring to the water cooling industry, not just the tech industry. And that is there are more players than there ever was. When I started my channel back in 2012, I'd already been water cooling for more than 10 years. At the time, when I first started water cooling, there might have been 5 major companies worldwide. We were talking Danger Den, which was actually on its way out. Really, it was a small mom pop type business that unfortunately just was not able to continue producing. But Danger Den existed. We had Swift Tech, we had XSPC, we had EK. And then I know there's another brand out there. Obviously we had Aqua Tuning, which was really kind of starting to grow right there. So those were like the main players. As the industry went on and water cooling became a little bit more mainstream, I've had people say my channel has really helped promote that. There are thousands of channels out there and people online that existed on all the forums and stuff doing their build guides that were showing people how water cooling worked long before me. So I don't want to take any credit for that. But I did push and promote water cooling enthusiasm, which is something I still do today. But you started getting more players in the industry. Then you got the high-end brands that were existing like Heat Killer and Aqua Computer, and EK was still considered a high-end brand, but we were talking water blocks at the time that might have surpassed $100 maybe. Not these $450 water blocks that exist today. But now fast forward to today, you've got so many more brands. You've got Bits Power, you've got Bike Ski, you've got Barotech, you've got Optimus, just go on Amazon, search water cooling, and then you'll start to find the brands that you've never even heard of, because now you've got the manufacturing in Asia, manufacturing under multiple names the same product. So now we've got money being spread across a much larger table of players that is affecting pretty much everything. That's not a bad thing. Competition's a good thing. And competition drives either one, innovation and survival. And if your brand can't innovate and adapt to more players in the industry and you fall off, which is kind of what happened to Danger Den, then that's unfortunately, the survival of the fittest. And you fall prey to that if you don't adapt. Unfortunately, what we kind of got here, and it was sort of the opposite, where we had a trendsetter like EK Water Blocks continuing to sort of evolve and innovate, but with that was exponential increase in cost for the products. Now, instead of having other brands come in and say, hey, we're just going to continue to offer value products, and we do have those that exist. We have, Barotech and Bike Ski, which are probably the most known of the newer players to the game, but they've also started increasing their costs. Because if you have the top basically saying, we're now going to charge $300 for a water block, where we used to charge $80 for it, you have other brands going, well, instead of charging $50 for our block, we can now charge $200 for our block, and it still looks like a deal versus the high-end player. So you start to get this increase in cost. And yes, manufacturing costs have gone up, but unfortunately, the demand has gone down with the increase in cost going up. And the demand went down just because of before we even talk about inflation or cost of living that we're experiencing now in 2024, this was always a commodity. This was never a necessity. So as you're dealing with these costs going up, you start to deal with the fallout of consumers saying, well, you've just priced me out of the market. I'm no longer interested. I'll just get an AIO and I'll be fine. I don't need to have pretty tubes going around my build. I don't need to deal with any of that crap. Because you used to be able to build a pretty mid-tier loop for about $500, including a GPU. Now you're looking at $1,000 to $1,500 minimum to build something like you see behind me right here. For what? A few better degrees? It's about enthusiasm. It's about being an enthusiast and loving that type of stuff. Unfortunately, what people love more than this is food on their table, or a roof over their head, or gas for their car to get to work, to be able to barely meet ends meet. So what we've got here is a perfect storm that has now caused a wave across the entire industry when it comes to water cooling, to where we might actually see water cooling companies start closing down entirely. I don't think we're that far from seeing EK Water Blocks potentially close its doors when it comes to the consumer water cooling products. EK Water Blocks has multiple companies, not just water cooling stuff. They also provide servers for data centers and stuff. That's actually the meat of their business, not this. So you might see this go away. EK Water Blocks still survives, and then here we are now left with the void that who knows who's gonna step in and fill. We've got big companies like Corsair that have stepped into the water cooling industry, because you may or may not know, back in 2017, the former EK CEO, Mark Tanko, moved to Corsair to help run their HydroX line. But it's my understanding that even that's struggling. So this just goes to show that if you value this at all, I guess as consumers, it's up to us to keep it alive. But obviously not at the cost of keeping your family fed and a roof over your house and transportation to and from the means at which you're using to scrape by. And unfortunately right now, this video is doing nothing more than providing me an outlet to say all this, and hopefully you do with it as you will. I am not saying go out and spend money on water cooling stuff. I've actually never said that. It has always been my passion that I share. And if you share that passion, it's up to you to do with that passion as you will. But I can tell you right now, if you have a choice of buying stuff like this from, say, a distributor like Amazon, or pretty much the only store I shop from, and it's not sponsored by Performance PCs, but performance-pcs.com is literally where I get everything. Everything comes from them. Even with the exception of the Corsair stuff, they have sent that direct, but everything else you've ever seen, the EK Water Blocks products, the Bike Ski products, these AlphaCool products, everything has come from Performance PCs, because for me, I would much rather promote a store like that is privately owned and privately run and family owned and operated, and put food on those families' tables than say the people that just do Amazon distribution and they just have digital startups and they really don't care beyond, being a large industry through a giant conglomerate like Amazon. As much as I love Amazon, I have always supported small business stuff like this when it comes to Performance PCs. So if you're looking at this going, well, I've been thinking about water cooling my system and I just don't know where to shop for that stuff, I cannot praise Performance PCs enough. I'll put a link to them down in the description below. I'm aware of how shilly and how absolute sponsored this sounds, but I promise you 100%, I have never received a dime from Performance PCs to promote them, not one. Full transparency, they have provided me product for free. I have always offered to pay for it. They insist on supporting me just like I'm supporting them. And I would really hate to see a company like Performance PCs not exist in the future, because we've already seen that happen with Frozen CPU. If you remember all the way back to 2016 or 15 or whatever it was, Frozen CPU was like the OG place to get all your water cooling stuff. Unfortunately, due to personal issues and other stuff that existed, and again, in a small family-run type of business, they were no longer able to proceed to operate at the level that they did before, which is when performance PCs really stepped up and filled that void. And I can't imagine a water cooling world without a company like Performance PCs. There's other brands out there like Titan Rig, and obviously depending on if you're in Europe, like there's Dasmode out in Europe. You've got Singularity Computers down in Australia. These are all family and owned operated companies that I'm worried may not exist here in the near future. So anyway, this is just a little food for thought. If one day you were like, man, I really wish I could have water cooled my system, but you're realizing that there's just few options out there, this is the way that the trend is really starting to look. And this isn't just the water cooling industry. This is tech as a whole. This is probably the slowest year we have ever seen when it comes to newcomers to the scene, to upgrading. Obviously the Intel stuff hasn't helped, because the more negativity you see in the industry, the more scared or timid people become when it comes to trying to get into that. So put yourself in the shoes of maybe a console gamer that's like, you know what, I kind of want to check out this whole PCMR thing. I've heard so much about it. Maybe I've got some extra money, or I've got a job now, I can maybe look into doing this. And you're hearing about the terrible consumer stuff taking place with Asus and the RMA stuff, all valid. The EK water block stuff that's happening, all valid. The Intel stuff that's happening, all valid. The lack of innovation that we're seeing from AMD on the latest launch. The increased cost of graphics cards that we've seen from NVIDIA over the last several generations, valid. Everything that you feel like should be bringing consumers into this space, in my opinion, is repelling them from the space. So I'm concerned. I'm definitely concerned what the future of PC tech looks like. And I feel like most of this exists from a very poor management perspective of all of these major companies. I feel like all of these major companies, EK Water Blocks, Intel, AMD, Asus, have all made very, very non-calculated missteps on assumptions of what the industry is going to look like in the future, all coming off of the heels of thinking the new norm of the type of spending that we saw in 2021 and 2022 was going to continue forever, and obviously it hasn't. Anyway, I just wanted to get this all off my chest. It's a bit depressing, but I feel a little better now having said it. And like I said, if you guys care about any of this stuff and you've been looking to upgrade or whatever, do me a favor, just check out performance-pcs.com. I'll put the link down below. Again, they have no idea I'm making this video. They have no idea I'm even promoting them. I just want to continue to do what I can to help this passion that I have over water cooling stuff. But by no means should you spend a single dime that you cannot afford to spend on something like this. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying as Jay said, we don't need to pay rent this month. We need to go get a water cooling system. That is bad. Okay, I go to pick apart and buy a radiator out of a car and do it old school way like I used to. There's plenty of options out there. I probably wouldn't recommend doing that anymore these days. But all right, guys, thanks for watching. Sound off down below. I'm curious how many of you have wanted to maybe get into water cooling, and that's outside of the fear of having fluid in your system. What has kept you from actually pursuing any of that? I'm sure the number one thing is going to be cost. And cost is a byproduct of the greed that has unfortunately existed in this space. And we all know who led the charge when it comes to continuing to increase the price. And you know who's paying that price now? You know who they are. If there's one thing I've become known as online, especially on YouTube, it's the Jesus. I feel like I have like a hair.